Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host, Mark Philpott. I have another exciting guest lined up for you today, so why don't we find out who it is? So it's a very warm welcome to Annie. Welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show today, Annie. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Now, whereabouts in the world are you chatting with us from today?
When I emailed you last, I was just about to hop on the plane. So I was in Guangzhou, China in the past few days, but I was just there for the weekend. So I'm back in Sydney now.
Oh, so we just flit up to Guangzhou for the weekend. How lovely is that?
Yeah, sounds pretty insane to some people, doesn't it? But for me, it's just kind of going with the motions of work, I guess.
So in Sydney, how long have you lived in Sydney for?
I was born and raised in Sydney, so I've been here all my life.
All your life. Okay. What do you like
Yeah.
most about living in beautiful Sydney, Australia?
I started off living in suburban areas with my family. I'm from a Vietnamese background, so my family are Vietnamese immigrants to Australia, and I grew up with a pretty humble upbringing. And then as I got older, I was able to move to the city. So I've experienced a lot of different parts of Sydney during that time, and I just think it's a land of
Mm,
opportunity, and there's so much to explore. I really love Sydney, and I love coming home to Sydney.
great. I love the positive attitude. Is there anything that you don't like about it, like in terms of its size and the way that it's getting big and busy and all the rest of it?
Oh, well, people say that Sydney is one of the most expensive cities to live in, I guess. So that's a
Mm,
factor. When you have a car, if you're trying to get around, parking can be a little bit of a pain in the CBD, especially. But I think it's a pretty multicultural place, and
yep.
it's nice where it's nice to have your upbringing here.
So, living in beautiful Sydney, what would you suggest to people that are coming there for the first time from anywhere over the world? Um, what are the three things that you'd say you must do when you visit Sydney?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is always the tourist destinations like the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. So when I have friends and family visiting Sydney for the first time, we kind of have a day trip out to the city and take them around the surrounds. If they have time, then I suggest climbing the Harbour Bridge, but that's not everyone's cup of tea. But I actually used to work.
Especially if you've got vertigo.
Yeah, but it's a good place to get over it with a nice view.
That's true, yeah.
So the Opera House and Harbour Bridge definitely one place. If you're someone that enjoys the outdoors, then I recommend spending some time a little bit further out from the city towards the Blue Mountains. So there's a lot of hiking tracks, and
Mm.
it's a beautiful landscape out there as well, completely different from the city. And number three, what would my third recommendation be? I guess everyone comes here for the beaches, so spending time at Bondi, Manly, one of those beaches. If it's summer, that's a good option.
Yeah, you can go to Bondi and you might feature in that Bondi TV show if you get rescued in the waves, yeah?
Well, fingers crossed you don't, but if you do, there's your 5 seconds of fame.
Yeah, exactly right. Some people might be into that. What I do with all of my guests on my show is I give you the opportunity to dedicate the show to someone special in your life. So you've got a memory of this podcast that you can share with someone special. Who would you like to dedicate this particular episode to today?
Oh, that's so nice. Can I please do a speech to my husband and my family? I feel like I'm accepting an award or something here.
Well, you are. You're being on this podcast show for the first time, so
Very
it is
prestigious.
an award. And so you'd like to dedicate this to your husband. What's his name?
His name is Will, and I guess when I do these podcast interviews and go through the history of how he got started and everything, he's very much involved in everything. So it would make sense for me to dedicate it to my husband, Will, and my husband, travel partner, photographer, everything.
Fantastic. Okay, well, that's a lovely dedication, and it's something you guys can have for the rest of your lives now by having this episode stuck away somewhere on your iPhone. Now we're
I'll
going to
make him
talk.
listen to it, definitely.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got one listener anyway. That's fantastic. Now, you're a Instagram influencer, you're a travel blogger, you're somebody that gets on a plane, goes around the world, goes to amazing places, and writes up about it all. Now, how did all this get started for you?
I'm not sure how much time you have, so just stop me if I take a little bit too much of your time. It started a while ago, actually. So yeah, when I was in high school, I started teaching myself how to design and build website templates to help other people with their websites. So I had Photoshop and I was teaching
Mm.
myself basic HTML, and that was super interesting to me. Then about like 1 to 2 years into it, I thought, hey, I might as well use one of these site templates and start my own website. So it was just a blog to begin with, and I was really into fashion and beauty and DIY projects and all that fun stuff that you're probably not interested in at all.
Of course we are.
Um, and then and then I realized after looking at my website traffic that I realized when I was looking at my website traffic that the site traffic was picking up quite a bit from Pinterest. And
Mm.
Pinterest is a very visual platform. So it kind of encouraged me to continue to learn more about photography and editing and focused on the visual aspect of the website. And I had all these apps that I was using to edit pictures, and I just really wanted to perfect that art. So I downloaded Instagram thinking that it was just an app where I could use filters. I literally used Instagram for the first time, uploaded a picture, used the filter, had no idea that the public could see it, and was just using it as a tool to edit my photos.
So, what was the dream at school? Was it to be a web designer or something like that, or did you have a completely different dream to do something else in your life as far as a career goes?
In terms of career options, my parents were very traditional and they kind of said, you're either a doctor, a dentist, or a failure. So, being a web designer or content creator, all of that was just a completely different world for me. I didn't even think that they were job options,
Mm.
to be honest. I didn't actually like anything within medicine, so I took a more broad approach and I studied Bachelor of Business and I majored in marketing. So that continued on, and I worked in marketing for about a decade while running an Instagram and a blog on the side just for fun, not doing it for monetization or to grow followers or anything like that. It was purely a passion project, and it kept me busy while I was busy at my work because I needed a creative outlet. And then eventually it just got too hard to balance both because I started getting contacted for travel opportunities when I started doing
Mm.
travel content. And I had to turn opportunities down just because I can't take time off work for these travel opportunities. And when I realized that I could get paid to actually do what I really loved rather than just going through the motions of my 9 to 5, I thought about what I wanted in the long term. And I did have some friends that were freelancers or they had their own business and they took the leap to leave their corporate job to do what they were really passionate about. And they encouraged me to do the same. And on top of that, all of my friends and family were kind of saying, hey, if all else fails, you could always go back to your another corporate job. There are plenty of opportunities out there. You've got a portfolio of experience now. You've got your options open. And I took the leap and decided to just go off and do my own thing. And here I am a year and a half later, and I'm still going.
Mm. So you started a year and a half ago. What was that first transition like? I've had a lot of bloggers on my show so far, and they talk about the different emotional aspects of that transition away from a day job into the passion job and the travel experience. How was it for you, that transition period?
My friends were very encouraging and supportive, so I had them to talk to and confide in terms of like all my stresses and the anxiety of going away from something that was more stable to something that was brand new. But I had a bit of pushback from my family and even from my partner, Will, at first. They were both scared that I was kind of um, they were scared that I was no longer using my expertise and all the experience that I had built up from the past decade and that it would be a waste. But I thought,
Mm.
I'm either going to be stuck in an office doing this for the rest of my life, which isn't for me. It might be something that other people prefer, but I always knew that I needed to escape. And if I could make that escape my day to day, that would be a dream. So why not try it now.
Your journey started off by going into the travel world. So you said you were getting contacted by a lot of different organizations. Were those organizations still there and around when you actually made the leap to go and do this full time? Were they some of your first partnerships that you developed?
I guess they were, but that was just because that's the way that I deal with clients or anybody that I work with. So I like to keep a good relationship with people. I try to be on top of everything and as professional as I can be. But I know friends that are trying to balance both, and because their work life gets so busy that they can't maintain that relationship between the clients that have contacted them. So it's hard for them to make the leap because they're not confident in the relationships that they've built with other people. But there was definitely a switchover period. So when I first started all of my Instagram content and website content, I mentioned before that I was doing fashion and beauty and those kinds of things. So I was just flooded with all these brands that wanted to work with me, and they were wanting to send me clothes and get me to take pictures of bags and designer outfits and all these things. And I kind of lost myself within that because I was overwhelmed with the requests that were coming through. And I realized that I wasn't really passionate about these materialistic things anymore. I didn't really love fashion and beauty and brands, but I really was gravitating towards travel, and I took time off to kind of find myself and look for my passion project again, because I kind of lost that when I was focusing on fashion and beauty and things that I wasn't really wanting to do anymore. And I started traveling out of my own pocket. During this time was when I met Will, and we were just both on the same wavelength. He was super spontaneous, wanted to travel the world, and we connected on every level. And he inspired me to focus on travel and my art instead of losing myself to all these brand collaborations that I may have not been passionate about anymore. And it wasn't until I went off and did my own thing that really aligned with companies that I naturally already used or worked with or have done things with them before, and we kept that relationship. So it was easy to keep that going after I left the corporate life.
That's a really interesting phenomenon, isn't it? When you put yourself out there and you're honest, transparent, authentic self, then all these opportunities do come along. It's just the way the universe seems to work, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you've got the right focus, I definitely think so. If your passion is to create content and you're always focusing on improving yourself and improving your work, then I think naturally you will find successes there. But if your passion is just to get famous and to have followers, and you'll kind of just bounce from one thing to the other, and it'll be very short-lived. So it's definitely dependent on what your focus is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And for everybody that's listening today, and I can assure you there's lots of people that are listening who are into wanting to start something in the travel blogging world. So, you're going to be a really great inspiration today to those people, and also giving them very helpful tips on how to go about it from the beginning. So what I'd like to do is really dive into some of the more philosophical aspects of what you're doing so that we can understand how that's kind of emotionally, physically, spiritually managed by yourself. Because I think that's an intriguing part of being a travel blogger. So one of the first things I want to ask you is how does writing and posting about travel actually change the travel experience itself? Obviously, when you go off on a trip and you don't have to do all that reviewing and stuff, you have a completely different experience. So how is it for you?
I used to be a very base level traveler. So when I first went overseas, I would just kind of do activities or go sightseeing and not really research into things a lot deeper. I did really enjoy the moment, but I guess once things were done, it was a fleeting experience. And now when I reflect back onto things and research into things deeper, I have a bigger grasp on why things are a certain way, the historical background, and I appreciate things a lot more. In saying so, though, while you're traveling for work-related things, you kind of get the opportunity to do things that you wouldn't naturally choose to do yourself. So sometimes I'm booked for work with travel companies that might take me to places that I would have never thought to go to in the first place, and it really opens up your mind to a lot of different things. So I'm very grateful for that. Makes me very appreciative of everything out there.
Mm. Can you give us an example of one of those places that you were sent to for work that you wouldn't have gone to if it was up to you to choose?
Well, I've been to Bali many times. I think a lot of Australians have, and a lot of people who go to Bali think of it as a party area, and that's what I did the first time that I went to Bali. And then last year, I was invited by Indonesia's Ministry of Tourism to go on their influencer trip, and they booked us in for a lot of cultural experiences and some hidden gems with a lot of religious background, and I got to experience a different side of Bali, and I truly appreciated the people and the culture a lot deeper and understood it a lot more. So I thought that was amazing. And I also went on another
Mm.
trip to Vietnam, which was another influencer campaign. And I'm from the south of Vietnam. This trip took me up to the north of Vietnam, which was somewhere that I had never been before, which was a real eye opener for me as well. So there's definitely
Mm.
those experiences that make you think twice about countries that have that I guess people have an expectation for, and it completely blows you out of the park. So they're the two that I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Now, what I thought we'd do today is we'd actually walk through one of your, typical review processes so people could understand what's actually involved. And I thought we'd go with your most recent one, the trip to Guangzhou in the weekend. So when you do a trip like that and you did an airline review on that particular trip, what's the process that you do in terms of before you even leave to go on the trip, and then obviously what do you do on the flight, and how does it all unfold for you actually putting together that review?
Every review experience is different. So this one in particular was with China Southern Airlines, and their brief to me was that they wanted me to review their business class flight and experience that, as well as the airport lounge, but also spend some time in China. And they kind of left that open to me so I could go to the places that I wanted to go that I naturally wanted to photograph, and I could create Instagram content for both my channels and theirs. So the brief was sent through to me before the trip. I had everything printed out just in case I couldn't access my emails and all of that.
Right.
It was up to me to organize my own visa, but that's covered when all the content is sent through and submitted. So flew to China and flew over there really early in the morning. We landed about like 6, 7 a.m. in Guangzhou. Couldn't check into our hotel until 2 p.m. So we literally walked around for like 10 hours. During the
Right.
yeah, but during those 10 hours, those 10 hours that we spent walking around, it was just meant to be exploring the area and getting to know the places that we were scouting out to photograph. But we ended up taking photos along the way anyway, and I finished that brief within the first few hours of being in Guangzhou because we found some hidden gems that were close to us that were really great. Then the rest of the day, we got to relax and eat a lot of food and have fun and explore the city at night as well. Had a really good sleep at the hotel, and then woke up at 4 a.m., hopped on the plane. Sorry, we went to the airport first,
Mm.
experienced their airport
Mm.
lounge there, and took some photos of the food in the area and the amenities that they had. And then it was time to check into our flight, and we flew in business class. So um, had to wait until the seatbelt
Mm.
sign turned on. And after it was safe to get out of your seat, that's when we started taking photos, and we were done within the first 20 minutes or so of the flight and could enjoy the rest of the flight. So some people kind of think, oh, why don't you spend time to enjoy these destinations rather than spend all of your time taking pictures? Like you're not getting a genuine experience when you go, and that's kind of the backlash that you get
Mm.
when you're a content creator. But we get things done quite quickly, and then we can spend the rest of the time actually enjoying the experience. And then I write down some notes on my phone if I have anything to note in my review later on, and I go home and I have time to edit and upload everything. So that's how it works.
Wonderful. Now, as far as the schedule goes, is that something that's negotiated with the brand that you're working with, or do they say to you, "Okay, this is what we're giving you, and you've got to basically take what they're offering you"? How does that work?
That's an interesting one because with this one in particular, Will, my husband, came with me and he actually works in a 9 to 5 office job. So he had no annual leave and we had to do this quickly over the weekends because I really wanted to share that experience with him. Otherwise, if it was up to me and just the airline, they told me that I have the flexibility to choose my arrival and departure dates. So I could have stayed in Guangzhou for as long as I wanted to. But in this instance, we just kind of had to quickly do it over the weekend. Otherwise, if it was up to me, I definitely would have loved to extend my time wherever I'm going so I could have some more free time to explore the area.
Mm. Do you get to travel much with Will? Do you, even though he's got a full-time job, are there other experiences that you've gone off and done together?
It is definitely hard to get him on every trip, so he can do the shorter trips, but I'm actually leaving to Nepal and Malaysia on Sunday. So from the 10th to the 15th, I'm in Malaysia with their tourism board, and then I go straight from Malaysia to Nepal for another 2 weeks. And Will can't join that trip, unfortunately, because it's quite long, but I'll keep in touch with him
Mm.
over the phone and via email. It does get quite hard when he can't join every trip, but at least he can do the short ones.
Now let's talk about social media because it is such a large component of what you do, and you've got a substantial following on Instagram, which I find really fascinating because a lot of the other travel bloggers I've spoken to in the last month in particular, they've been quite discerning about Instagram and the way that it manages its business, in particular its algorithms. Yet you're going guns a blazing on Instagram. So how's that journey been for you, and why are you so successful on Instagram?
It's funny because I'm from a marketing background, so I know how to deal with influencers. So I've seen the other side of brands working with influencers, and I know exactly what brands are looking for when they reach out to an influencer like me. So I try and keep it professional. I have a media kit with all of my statistics, and when I upload Instagram posts, I try and engage with my audience and reply to comments and messages and just keep it alive. So I think that's definitely given me a foot forward because I've seen both sides of things thanks to my work. And I guess the other thing is I just have a consistent flow of
Mm.
content. So if you're kind of posting things on and off, then you have some traction, then you lose some, you have some, and then you lose some. But if you've got plenty of content to keep you going, then the
Mm.
momentum's definitely faster. So they might be the two reasons why.
Is your Instagram success built on the back of something in particular that helped take it off, or has it been a steady trajectory upwards for you?
I definitely see a boost in engagement and reach when other pages that have quite a substantial following will repost my work. So when I first started out in travel, I would take pictures and go to places, and everything was purely out of my own pocket because that was what I was passionate about, and I wasn't working with any travel brands to begin with. Everyone has to start somewhere, and that's how I started with my travel content. And if I would go to a country or, yeah, so if I go to a destination and I take a photo in a popular
Yeah.
landmark or in a
So,
hotel or something like that that had a substantial following, I'll always make sure to tag them in my pictures. Sometimes I might even reach out to their PR email addresses and say, hey, I took these photos for you while I was away. I had a really great experience and just tried to build a relationship from there. So I think that definitely helps as well.
right. Do you have a love-hate relationship with social media, or is it just something that, it's a sign of the times and you embrace it and it's a very meaningful part of your work?
I can definitely see why some people have a negative relationship with social media. When I first started using Instagram, and it was just an app that I used for my filters, and I didn't realize being an influencer was anything at all. Because it all started just purely out of creativity. I loved Instagram and I really embraced it, and I thought that it was a really interesting platform. And then over time, when an influencer was a career that people were going for, I could feel the pressure from other people, and I was probably following the wrong Instagram channels that made me feel inferior or that I wasn't good enough, or it made me focus on the wrong things other than just my own content. And over time, I just learned that I need to focus on my own work and focus on doing what I love and following pages that inspired me to do better rather than the opposite. And from there, I've connected with really great people on the trips that I've been on with the companies that I've worked with. I've met content creators that continue to inspire me, that I've kept a relationship with, that I've traveled with again and again. And I find those experiences really meaningful, and it makes me truly appreciate Instagram as a platform that can connect me to inspiring people that way. But I can definitely see how it can sometimes mentally affect you when you're focusing on the wrong things or following the wrong people, for sure.
Is Instagram now your primary focus in terms of the different social media platforms that are available to you? Is it the one that you spend the most time on?
Surprisingly, yes. I didn't think it would turn out that way, but over the past year or so, Instagram's definitely been the front runner for me. But apart from that, I think a lot of brands reach out to me for Instagram content, plus just photography content that they can use on their websites and social media channels as well. So it's definitely a channel, but I do work outside of just an Instagram post on my channels. I create social media content, which is very, very valuable for brands that can't afford to hire multiple photographers, and they'd rather kill two birds with one stone and work with an influencer to reach out to their channels as well as have their photography on board too. So, yeah.
Okay, really interesting. Now, your online blog site is called Where to Fly Next. Where did that name come from?
I can't remember. I think I was just sitting down with my husband and trying to brainstorm some website names. And I would think of something, and then Will says, no, it doesn't roll off the tongue. And he'll think of something, and I'll say, no, that sounds too masculine. It should be something that's more neutral, that relates to everybody. And we
Mm,
decided on
mm.
wheretoflynext.com.
Yeah, great. Is it all about flying? Do you only do trips by plane?
We do a lot of hiking around here in Sydney. So I have some blog posts down, way deep down somewhere where we started hiking. But I think mainly the content that I've got on there is around other countries. But I am starting to work with more Sydney brands as well. So I've got a mix of both.
So, being based in Sydney as a global influencer, is it a hindrance or a help being so far away from the rest of the world?
Depends on who reaches out to you. I think sometimes people just assume that I'm in the US. A big portion of my followers are from the US. So that becomes a little bit difficult when they realize I'm in Australia, and then everything's a little bit harder to get to me or organize for me, because Australia is a world away from most countries in comparison to others.
Mm.
But I haven't found that it's been a major barrier at all. There's definitely ways to get around it.
How often do you try to post on your site? Is it determined by every trip you do, or are you doing other kinds of content to keep the site, ticking over, so to speak?
So when it comes to working with other brands, they obviously have their deadlines on when they want things to be posted. So when I'm working with someone, I'll just plan out my content in advance so that I've got things that don't interfere. I've got posts that don't interfere with the collaborative posts. But I try and update my Instagram daily, or at least 5 times a week, I'd say. And on the blog, it really depends. So some months I'm uploading like once a week, others it's once a fortnight. It really depends when I have time to gather everything. Sometimes the blog posts take a little bit longer just because it's more in
Mm.
depth, but Instagram content is quite easy for me, I think.
What do you like most about reviewing brands?
It's kind of like a diary entry for me sometimes. I really think it's
I bet it is.
therapeutic.
Mm.
Yeah, just like you, loving the art of interviewing people and getting to pick their brains and know things. I find it therapeutic to write everything down on paper. So I'm not a very audio person, but I'm more of a text person, if that makes any sense. So I do enjoy going back and looking back at everything that we did and putting it down on paper for sure.
Are there brands that you actually avoid? Do you look at brands from an ethical standpoint and say, well, there are brands that I actually won't work with? Have you got to that stage yet?
There are some brands that have reached out to me, and I've responded with. I'm unfortunately working with another brand that is that is quite similar, and I won't be able to. I wouldn't spread myself too thin, really. So I try and pick and choose who I work with
Mm.
depending on who I would naturally promote on my end anyway. When I used to do like fashion and beauty, sometimes I got lost in things and would just say yes to every opportunity that came through. And then over time, I just felt really burnt out and I didn't feel like I was being genuine anymore. So I definitely don't want to fall back into that. And I'm more selective of who I work with now.
Would that be a tip that you would say to my audience about, if you're going to go down this path and start off being a travel blogger or a blogger in general, be very selective in who you associate yourself with and collaborate with?
I think so, because who you align yourself with kind of reflects your brand, and you want to look back on the work that you've created and be proud of it and not feel like you're no longer authentic or promoting something that you wouldn't recommend to your friends and family. So it's easy to get lost into it when you first start out and you're really excited because brands want to work with you. But in the long run, it's much better to be more selective and choose people that you would naturally promote yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and I can't stress it even more. It's all about being authentic to yourself and who you are, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, that's why I'm quite transparent now when people do ask me about my past and then I talk about how I got lost into things before. I think it happens to a lot of people and they just don't talk about it.
Now, you get to stay in some pretty cool hotels around the world. So, can you tell us about some of your favorites and why they were your favorites?
My favorite would probably be the first hotel that I ever worked with, actually. It was an important one because it was the first, and I think people never forget their first, right?
There you go. Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. So, that experience was
Uh,
special because it was your first one there.
Well, that, and on top of that, it was in Cappadocia in Turkey, and it was my first time going to a country that was so vastly different from anything that I've ever seen. So I probably sound like a broken record because I say this to people who ask me all the time, but I absolutely fell in love with Cappadocia, Turkey, and I was working with Museum Hotel. At that time, I didn't have that many followers, and they really took a chance on me because they really loved my content and they wanted to host me at their hotel and work with me to create content for their cave hotel and their rooftop where you can see the view of the hundreds of hot air balloons that take flight at sunrise in the morning. And it just absolutely took my breath away. I got super emotional. I actually cried when that happened.
Well, that's fantastic. That's about as authentic as one can get.
I think you can't explain just how much of a fairy tale it looks like until you're actually there. So, for anybody who's looking for a destination to go to, I definitely recommend Cappadocia in Turkey. And the hotel to stay there would be a cave hotel, like museum hotel, sorry.
Mm.
That was the hotel that I worked with.
Mm.
They were a luxury boutique hotel. They only had a few rooms. Every room in that hotel was carved out of a cave and it followed a different theme, and they had real historical artifacts all over the hotel. It was just so unique and so beautiful. It was definitely something that's been really etched into my mind.
In your eyes, what makes a great hotel experience?
I think some people really like that luxurious, modern, sleek hotel experience, but I like something that's not the complete opposite, but that's completely unique. So I stayed in a treehouse hotel. I've stayed in, where else have I stayed that's quite different? So the Cave Hotel is really different. I like something that isn't anything
Mm.
similar to what I could experience at home or in the Sydney CBD.
Since you've been doing hotel reviews, has the style of hotels changed in terms of what are hotels doing differently than they were doing a couple of years ago?
Most hotels, I think, are quite traditional with their content. So a lot of them do a lot of press and are in publications. And I think influencer collaborations are kind of a new thing. So hotels are very open to working with influencers now to create photography content, which I think is a real plus. But I do feel that sometimes in the media, they do portray influencers working with hotels from quite a negative standpoint. So I'm always trying to be quite,
Mm.
I guess, when I work with a hotel, I want to make sure that that hotel is somewhere that I would naturally stay at and that they have come to me for my content and not the other way around.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think the media is having that slant on influencers in particular?
I guess influencers just have Let me try and think of something. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, it's always amazed me that I think there's got to be a degree of jealousy involved because of influencers are, whether you like it or not, they're taking over a very large portion of content creation that's done in an innovative style.
I think a lot of people are probably basing their judgment on influence based on somebody that has done something that wasn't ethical or aligned with other people's beliefs, or maybe there is some sort of resentment there. I'm not sure. It's a touchy topic for me just because I can sometimes understand where prejudice comes from, but then other times it's kind of like there's always two sides to every pancake, and you need to see that there are really great, inspirational, really humble, lovely, amazing, talented content creators out there, and not everyone is an airheaded influencer that just wants free work and to do things for free and for fame. I think there are two polar opposites of the influencer world, but some people just choose to focus on the negative, I guess.
Yeah, and that's humanity in large. So I don't think we need to go too much further in that. Let's go back to hotels. Do you get what you pay for when it comes to selecting a hotel these days?
It really depends on the hotel. I don't want my answers to be generic, but it is true. I guess every hotel has their own pros and cons, and sometimes hotels meet expectations and others have things that they could improve on. So it really depends. But for me, it's always worth investing in a hotel that's in a good location, that's easy to get around with really helpful staff, all the things that you would naturally look for in a hotel. And I think a lot of hotels now know that that's a minimum for them because everyone, even the public, not just influencers, are reviewing them on every single website out there. So most hotels I've stayed at have been really quite good.
Mm. How long does a typical hotel review stay last for?
Every hotel that I've stayed in has been for at least 3 days, I'd say. So 3 to 5 days. But I typically like to experience at least two different hotels if I stay in a certain area, just so I can compare the two. So I usually stay around 3 days.
Okay, 3 days. And that gives you plenty of time to get out and experience everything the hotel has to offer in terms of, eating and the facilities and everything else. Do you have a checklist that you go through every time you go to a hotel?
Sometimes hotels, they give me their own checklists. So as part of the brief, they'll say, oh, we just renovated this room and would love you to stay here, take photos of this, take photos of the view, experience our buffet breakfast, maybe have a drink at the bar. So some of them have a checklist for you to follow already. But most hotels are pretty laid back. They'll just kind of book you into a room and then you have your free reign on how you would like to photograph and review it. I try and photograph as much of the room and the surrounds and the view as I can. But in terms of the restaurants and all the other facilities within the hotel, I think most of the time I do try the dining places, not all the time. It kind of depends on how much time I have at that hotel and whether or not that's something that they've booked me into, I guess. But with other facilities, it's up to me, really.
So I'm really fascinated by this whole concept of being an influencer and travel blogger because I'm looking at this from a career perspective. How long how long do you plan to do this for? Do you have an exit strategy? Is there something in mind that you think, right, when I get to this age, I'll get out, or is it just something you're going to take for as long as you can do it?
I'm hoping when I do start a family and I need time away to focus on kids and starting a family with my husband, that I'd be able to find a happy medium that works for everyone. But it is a question that comes up, I guess, from my family a lot of the time. How much longevity is in this, I'm not too sure, but I hope to be able to travel forever and be able to pass that on to the next generation as well. So I guess there might be a transition period where I am focusing on family, but then in the long run, travel is always going to be something that I'm passionate about and want to inspire other people to do. And content creation is one too. So whether that be creating travel content, it might change over time. But at the moment, that's what my eyes are set on, and that's what I really love. So I'm kind of just going with the flow at the moment.
I think you also need to mention to your mother that if you were a doctor, you'd probably see less of them anyway compared to being a travel blogger.
Exactly. Even when I was working in my corporate job, I would be the first one in the office and the last to leave sometimes. And I would come home grumpy and irritated, and I wasn't a pleasant person to be around. So it affects everything in your life when you're working in a job that you're not happy about.
What were you doing in the corporate world?
So I was working in marketing for about 10 years. I was a marketing executive for a few different corporations. My most recent one that I left before I started this travel content, I was actually working for a charity here. So I was doing a lot of soul searching, and I just thought that I was working for corporations that maybe I wasn't super passionate about, and I really wanted to work somewhere where I felt like I was making a difference. So I made a switch and worked for a charity, and I was the digital marketing manager there. But over time, like the stresses of work also got to me, and because I had this opportunity come up, and I thought it might go away at some point, and I should take advantage of it now. That's when I made the switch. But my last corporate job working for a charity was
Mm.
quite fulfilling, actually. It just didn't fulfill me in other ways that what I'm doing now could. So it's quite different.
What have your travel experiences so far taught you about the world that we live in today?
My travel experiences have really opened me up to all the different culture.
I was imagining when you went to Vietnam for that trip to the north and you probably went to Hanoi for the first time, and that must have been quite a watershed experience for you.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, I know how my parents grew up, and I experienced what it was like for them when I first went back to Vietnam and saw how they lived, but I never saw anything outside of their country towns. So it's definitely an eye-opening experience. I think travel has just taught me to be very appreciative and understanding of all different cultures and how people live, and appreciate where I come from too, because I'm always happy to go home and see my friends and my family. And when I see them, I really value my time with them even more. So there may be things that I've gained from travel, but there's just so much that it's really hard for me to try and condense it down in a few sentences and collect my thoughts.
No, I understand that. What's your all-time favorite travel destination so far, and why?
I think I've already mentioned Turkey. So Cappadocia and Istanbul were really wonderful experiences, and I definitely want to go back to Turkey again. I think it's a very underrated country, and something that people should definitely add to their bucket list. But one of my favorite new travel experiences
Mm.
that I did was an African safari. So Will and I went to Masai Mara National Reserve in Africa, and it was just amazing just to see wildlife walking around in a natural habitat and watch them from afar. It was something that I had always wanted to do, and it completely blew me out of the water. It was way more than what I had ever expected. So that's probably my new favorite travel experience.
What are a couple of the places on Annie's bucket list that you really want to go to that you haven't been to yet?
I surprisingly have not been to Peru. I would love to go there. So maybe that's in my sights for next year. Um, but to be honest, any
Hmm.
travel opportunity that comes up, it may or may not be a country that's on my radar, and I'd be happy to experience it. So with my next trip, when I do go to Nepal, Nepal has never been something that has been at the forefront of my mind. But when the tourism board reached out to me, I thought, why not? Like, that's definitely somewhere that I'm open to going to. So new and exciting places like that really get me, and I hope that Nepal is going to be a good experience, and I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure it will be. Now, with all the traveling you've done, what would you like to see change the most about travel experiences like flying and hotels? What can those two particular areas of the travel industry do to make life, say, better or more efficient for travelers?
That's a very good question.
In terms of flying, is flying easier today than it's ever been in terms of the process of getting in and out of airports? And are there airports around the world like Changi Airport in Singapore that stick to mind as far as being efficient and excellent to fly through? Are there lots of developments going on that you see when you travel?
Most airports that we've experienced have been quite a smooth process. I guess when you go there during peak hour, it is a little bit harder if you're not, if you don't have that opportunity to go through the priority check-in line, then you might be waiting for a while. But the internet's definitely made things a lot easier. You can check in online. There are self-service kiosks everywhere. I think technology has really brought things, made things much more efficient. In terms of hotels and how they could improve their
Mm.
experience with tourists, I mean, I'm not too sure. I really love it when hotels give you a bit of a cultural demonstration with whichever country that you're in so that you can have a grasp on other things that you can have a grasp on the history of the hotel and the country that you're in, which I think is really great. So it's always nice to have that insight into the cultural background of things.
Are you somebody that arrives at a hotel and drops your suitcases and heads out the door to explore the city, or are you somebody that gets settled into your hotel and has a rest first and gets acclimatized, so to speak?
So this is where Will and I differ because he wants to just have a lie down in the hotel and relax before we head out, and I'm more of a let's drop off our luggage and go kind of person. It depends on what time we arrive there. So if it was like our last trip in Guangzhou and we couldn't check in till the afternoon, we had no choice but to drop off our luggage and explore. But we had such a limited time in that country anyway that I think we would have just done that regardless of our check-in time. But if we were going somewhere where we had quite a bit of time there and the flight was quite long and we were really tired, then probably need a power nap before we go just to freshen ourselves up. I have no issue with exploring right away, but I just don't want to burn out my travel partner and my husband. So just have to make sure he gets some shut eye too.
That's probably a very strong and wise strategy to have that consideration for him.
No one wants to be with the grumpy traveler, that's for sure.
Do you prefer traveling by yourself or with somebody else, not necessarily your husband, but do you like being alone sometimes and traveling?
I tend to wake up quite early, so I get that alone time to myself in the morning. I'm usually up maybe 5 or 6 a.m. wherever I am, wake up. So I have a few hours in the morning where I can
Mm.
kind of do my own thing. Maybe I want to go for a run outside or just for a walk around and collect my thoughts and write down journal entries or whatever it is that I want to do. But I do really love that I get to share experiences with him. Sometimes I'm on a trip by myself and I'll take a photo or a video of something just because I wish that Will was there or I wish my family was there because they would have really enjoyed it. So I I like some alone time, but I definitely love when I can
Mm.
share the experience with other people.
Do you spend a lot of time walking around cities where you visit, or are you somebody that will jump in an Uber and get around a city that way?
Depends how safe it is in the country that I'm in.
Mm. Mm.
When we were in Hawaii, for example, like we were right smack bang in the middle of the city, and I would wake up early, go for a jog down at the beach and around our hotel, and maybe grab a coffee on the way back. So it was easy to explore when you're in that kind of environment. But when we were in Egypt, for example, we were working with a tour guide there, and he kind of said, "Oh, it's a little bit of a dangerous time right now to be outside by yourself. So it's probably better if you save all your exploring with me, and then that way I can negotiate and translate and take you to the safer places." So it really depends where you
Mm.
are. If I can get that exploration time in by myself, then I would love to. But if it's just not that safe outside, then I'd rather be with people that can guide me.
Mm. Okay. Annie, I've got the most difficult question of the whole episode ready for you now. You ready?
I think so. I mean, I'm trying to be ready for this episode. I'm just not sure how helpful I am, so we'll see.
Okay, the most difficult question you have to answer today is what is your favorite snack food when you're traveling?
Oh, oh, there's so many snacks. Where do I even start? Oh, you know what I love? I am a sucker for going into a 7-Eleven or a supermarket and just buying all the weird looking snacks that I have no idea what the label says, but I want to try. Like I love doing that in Japan. We did that in China too. So, yeah. It's really funny actually because I end up buying pretzels a lot, so maybe it's pretzels.
Maybe it's pretzels. Okay. Well, that's a question. That's a question that I ask all of my guests what their favorite snack food is. And in my studio here, I actually have a whiteboard, and I'm keeping a tally of what are the most popular things that people are saying. And you're the first person that's actually come up with pretzels. So there you go. You go top of the list for pretzels.
Is that the most boring snack that you've heard? What are the other ones?
No, I've had some doozies actually. I've had some really doozies. But someone has pumpkin seeds. Someone takes pumpkin seeds. There's been curry puffs. Would you believe that was an Australian guy who goes surfing around the world? He loves curry puffs, so I thought that was quite
Oh,
cool.
I mean, they're
But lots
good, but
of
I'm not sure
chocolate.
how I can carry that around with me.
Been lots of people that like chocolate and peanuts and the
hmm
those trail mixes and all those sorts of things as well.
Oh, yeah, they're really great as well. But I can get them at home, so I usually grab the most exotic thing, which is apparently pretzels. So maybe I should take that comment back.
Now we're rushed through our time today, but before I let you go, I'd like you to share with the audience, say what your top three tips are for starting a travel blog. What are things that people should really be make sure they focus on if they want to start up a travel blog?
I guess my first tip would be to find out what you're really passionate about because if you're starting a travel blog just to make some money out of it, it's not the right path for you. If you're starting a travel blog because you really like to create content like me and photography is your thing, then focus on the visual platforms where you can grow a portfolio and get those pictures to the right people. Um, my second tip is just to focus on improving yourself rather than focusing on what other people are doing. So that's how you get caught up in the negative side of Instagram. Stay on the positive, focus on yourself, and just keep on improving your what you're really loving to do, and that's going to get you far, and organically things will work out. And then number three is if an opportunity comes to you and you're trying to weigh out the pros and cons of leaving something that's stable for your passion project, my advice would be it's now or never, I guess. While you're young and able to do these things and have these options available to you, just take on opportunities that come to you, and you can always fall back to what is safe, but opportunities will come and go and make most of it, really.
Mm. I would totally agree with that, and I would just add one further tidbit to that one, and saying not only when you're young, if you're also middle-aged, go for it because you only live once, and why not get out there and do what you're passionate about?
I think my default is to say young and able, but what I really mean is, I guess, someone who is able and not having anything holding them back from taking up these opportunities. So no age discrimination there.
Fantastic, and a very good comeback, I must say too, Annie.
I didn't want to label myself as young either because I don't think I am that young, but I mean, I'm not an ageist.
Okay, great. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure and fun to have you on the show today, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and spend an hour with us. And I'm sure that my guests have got a lot of great tips and advices, not only on destinations where to go to, but also on how to potentially start a travel blog. I would love for you to come back on the show sometime after you've done one of your next trips and and talk to us about the trip and all the things that you got up to. If you'd like to do that, would you like to come back again sometime?
Yeah, definitely. I think by then maybe the nerves would go away and I'd be able to answer your questions properly. I'm new to going on podcasts and doing these interviews. I think the more that I do them, the easier it will get. But to start with, it's always a little bit nerve-wracking.
Well, you've done a great job today, so don't be so hard on yourself. And I'm sure when you listen to this back with your husband and your family, you're going to enjoy it.
Okay, I hope so. I trust you, so we'll go with that.
Annie, thanks very much for being on the Global Travel Channel podcast show today. I'm going to put a link to all your sites in the description of the podcast so that people can find your blog site, they can find your Instagram page, and they can follow you in all your amazing travel journeys around the world. So, Annie, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
There we are. My guest today has been Instagram influencer and travel blogger and writer, Annie Nguyen. Annie, it was great to have you on the show today. I look forward to having you back after one of your next trips. I hope you all got a lot out of that. There was plenty of great information on how to become an Instagram influencer, but also just to follow your passion in life and do what comes natural, and everything else will follow. If you're looking for more episodes on the Global Travel Channel, head on over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. There you will find all the list of our particular episodes. If you want to download those episodes, you can go to Apple iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and a host of other locations which are all listed on our website for you to download. If you like our content, make sure you share it with your friends and family and work colleagues. The bigger audience we have, the better, and getting more people into the travel scene. That's our overall goal with this show. Okay, well, that's it for this particular episode. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have bringing it to you. Until we meet again next time, my name is Mark Philpott, and I wish you all bon voyage.